Today I want to talk just a little bit about using bias tape in seams to finish off your sewing projects. So this is a little piece of fabric, just to remind you about what bias is. This is the selvage edge, very little give there. This is the crosswise where both threads, we have the warp and the weft. And there's a little bit of give there, but you want a lot of give to go around round bodies and curves. You go on a 45 and you get the bias, and you see all that stretch there? It stretches quite nicely. So bias is just a great tool for fitting around the body. Now you can buy all kinds of commercial bias. I've got a few samples here for you. You can get double fold, you can get single fold, you can get a narrow, and you can get a wider tape. There isn't a whole lot of selection in fabric stores for bias tape. They're usually pretty plain. However, I did notice on Etsy, you can get lots and lots of beautiful bias tapes, about $3 each. These are some tapes that I have made. Just bias strips. I like to do this in my spare time. I don't know what I'm going to use them for, but they're just chunks of fabric that I have around. An 18-inch square will make you quite a bit. And I just make my own bias. So, and I do love to use these as a piping. But before we get into piping, let's look at a bias strip here. So this is just a strip. I don't know what I'm going to use it for yet. I could put piping in, and that's basically putting in whatever filler cord I choose and sewing that in, and then I can put it in a seam. And I will show you some of those later. You can make them out of anything. Since we are upcyclers, something I like to do, just something to consider, these are ties. Ties are actually cut on the bias. So they have some lovely pieces that you can use on your shirts or t-shirts or whatever. There's just some gorgeous fabrics out there. And a lot of ties are made of silk. So you get some beautiful fabric. Typically at the thrift store, they're about 99 cents each. And shirts, you can get a men's shirt if you have a particular color that you really like and make some bias tape. Yeah, here are some fillers that you might consider using if you wanted to make it into piping. This fine cord here is got a slippery cover on it, so it moves in and out quite nicely. That's called mouse tail. It's very fine. There's a fatter one called rat tail, and this is for making piping now, if you wanted to take your bias strip into a piping. Now, how you use your bias tape, I want to just show you a close-up of, I think this is going to show up better on the camera. When you buy bias tape, you will notice it's all pre-folded and pre-ironed, but there is one side, yes, it does show up, look at that. There's one side that is a little bit wider than the top side, and that is so you can strategically stitch along there and catch it without having to refold it all. So when you are applying your bias, you use the smaller size, then you would sew this piece right in the ironed crease part right here. Let's get that nice and close right there. Just one stitch width away above, and you would put this on wherever your seam is. So I've actually done an example for you. I've pinned out bias, and I've just for ease here, I've just put it right to the seam, but your seam would probably be about 5/8 inch. This, I'm just matching it up. But you see where it's pinned? I'm going to sew right along that line there. And through the magic of videotaping, I've actually done that. And here it is here. So I have taken my seam, pinned it out, and I have sewn it along that stitch line, just one stitch width closer to the seam. And the reason I did it that way is so when I fold it over, I can then stitch along the previous stitching. That's called stitching in the ditch. And then the longer fold side will be caught, and that is this piece here, yes. And you can see how I have stitched in the ditch on one side, and when you flip it over, it's just caught the back. And this is actually the makings of a Hong Kong seam finish. Doesn't that look sharp? So nice and crisp. Great way to finish seams for lining a jacket. If you wanted some bright colors, you can really make a fashion statement on the underside of your garment. It'll also stop your seams from fraying. So that's a quick and dirty lesson on bias tape and bias seams strips.